family. Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I am your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. Ooh, I don't even want to tell you what the overview is because you'll just leave me. You'll leave me when you hear it. You'll say, nah, I'm good, but give me a chance. Put me in, coach. All right, listen. It's the Electoral College. Oh, and then it's a little bit about Trump and Putin. Ooh, yuck. But I promise, I swear to you, I made this interesting. Just one quick hit, because I got to save a lot of room for Civics 101, except, gate up. I got to say this. So I was reading the Canadian Medical Association Journal. I don't know. I just do a lot. I like to research and read and, do all the things myself. I'm nuts. What can I say? But I got to tell you, when do you remember a couple episodes ago, I made a joke about how, the way that white folks make fun of what people of color, racialized people eat. They make fun of ethnicity. And I was like, I'm going to start saying white people had scurvy. I wasn't serious. But I was reading the Canadian Medical Association Journal, and it was like, hey, you guys, scurvy's coming back. And I was like, no, did I do this? Did people start to revolt against vitamin C because of my work? I've got more power than I know. The whites have scurvy. I'm just joking. It actually didn't say that there, but it did say that scurvy was on the rise, but it's actually for poor people. So because of socioeconomic issues, and I'm like, no, that's actually unacceptable. Like, we can do better. We can absolutely do better. Anyway, the Electoral College. Okay, so here's my thing, right? Where it is a neck and neck race. I want to tell you something different. I want to tell you that we're in such a position to win, and of course, win has a little asterisk beside it, because we know it's about stemming the flow. We know it's about deciding what kind of fight we want to fight and under what kind of conditions. There is agency in this, but it is neck and neck, and it's why you're seeing Kamala Harris on podcasts, Donald Trump on streams, right? They're out here making these last-ditch efforts in several swing states. So this is a good moment to think about what it takes to actually win in the United States. Because a candidate becomes president not by winning a majority of the national popular vote, but through a system called the Electoral College, right? So this allots electoral votes to 50 states and the District of Columbia, largely based on their population. So I wrote this real cute, y'all. Just trust me on this. I'm going to get us through it. But it is so important that we understand things and also what options are on the table. So I'm going to be telling you about this cool guy who might not, I don't know, he might not be cool in person. I haven't met him, but he's got some cool books. And I've read these books, and I think they have something to offer about how we can actually change the shit. But anyway, first and foremost, we got to know what it is that we're changing. So what is it? What is the Electoral College? So when voters go to the polls to pick a president, you get your little thing. I don't know because I'm not allowed to vote here. But anyway, you see the names of the presidential and vice presidential candidates, right? However, you're not actually voting for them. Like, voters are actually voting for a group or slate of electors. So nationally, there are a total of 538 electoral votes or electors, and meaning like a candidate needs to secure 270 to win. So obviously, these electors are party loyalists, right? They pledge their support to the candidate who gets the most votes in their state, and blah, blah, blah. So do states have the same number of electorates? No, they don't. Right? So it's actually very annoying. When you really get down to the brass tacks, this country don't make no damn sense. I thought that there was something wrong with me. So, I come here and I'm like, shit, I got to figure this out. I actually went and worked at Color of Change for 2 years to try to be like, okay, well, why don't I ever know when a primary is happening? What do you mean it's happening at another time somewhere else? Okay, let me go figure that. And then when I finally got to the other side, I was like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. It's and it makes sense because the guys who wrote this shit were all sniffing coke all the time and had rotting teeth and scurvy. They didn't shower. Like, can we just take a minute to, the life expectancy was 35 years old. Not because there were just dangers all around, but because people were just nasty. They were just dirty, just running around, just nasty with dirty britches. And they, just to think that those nasty scallywags, their shadows just looming over us still? Are you serious? They all had syphilis, probably. You know, people are still getting down even if they're nasty. That doesn't stop. Oh my God. Anyway, just their long, dirty, scurvy syphilis shadows just shaping our experience of the world is very upsetting to me. Anyway, so, sorry. Back to the civics lesson. Okay. So we got this, each state has as many electors as it has representatives, right? And senators in Congress. So we know that reps get 2 years, senators get 4 years, and there are 2 senators for each state. But the allocation of seats in the House of Reps obviously varies based on population. So California, the most populous state, has 54 electors. The 6 least populous states and DC have only 3 electoral votes, right? That's the minimum number allotted to a state. So this means that 1 electoral vote in Wyoming, that's the least populous state, right? Beyond the one I just mentioned, represents about 192,000 people, right? So 1 electoral vote in Wyoming equals 192,000 people, while 1 vote in Texas, one of the most underrepresented states, represents about 730,000 people. That being said, I'm not caping for Texas ever. You want to talk to me about the 1-star state? I'm like, sounds like a review. Sorry, guys. Anyway, what's wrong with me? Why did I just say that was a Yelp review? I've lost my damn mind. Anyway, so that's, in all but 2 states kind of use a winner-take-all approach, right? The candidate that wins the most votes in that state generally gets all of its electoral votes. So it's supposed to work in a very particular way. Can a candidate win the election despite losing the popular vote? Yes. Which is insane. What you should hear, the translation of that is, despite what the vast majority of Americans who vote want, and people who vote want in this country, it ultimately comes down to the Electoral College, right? So, that's George. When I think about where shit went wrong, first, you want to talk about a stolen election? Hello, Bush, right? George Bush in 2001, and so did Trump in 2016. They both became president despite losing the popular vote. And again, I want to remind you that it's so easy to fall into this myth, right? That like, everything is awful and everybody's terrible. And if you go here into the Midwest, everyone's going to hate you. And if you go over there, everyone's going to hate you. It ain't like that. I mean, there's like weirdos everywhere. It's true. I mean, I'm not talking about like me being a weirdo. Like I'm talking about the other weirdos, like the ones who like hate people, not the ones who hate themselves. I'm joking. I don't. That's not what all the queers feel. We start out that way and then we become awesome. Sorry. I'm doing several episodes at once, and so I've lost it. More on that later. You don't need more on that later. Yeah, I've lost the plot. Let me get back into this. I'm sorry, y'all. I wanted to go. I had to like cram in the interest of times and monies. You guys know. But anyway, here's the thing. If you think of like when shit started to go south, you might think a Bush. The vast majority of people, maybe not the vast majority, but the majority of people who voted, they didn't want him. They wanted Gore. I wanted Gore. I wasn't even here. We could have had it all. Ish. Anyway, so they didn't win the popular vote. The majority of people didn't want them. It didn't matter because the Electoral College got the last say. This is the only time that it's happened in just like millennium or whatever. I think it happened in like 3 times in the 1800s, but I'm like, I'm not really thinking about the 1800s like that. I'm like, I wasn't even a people then. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't see us as a people. So, and I'm people. So anyway, this is often cited by critics as the main flaw of the system. And it's like, yeah. This is how they got the slave states to get on board in part. Right? That's how they were like, okay, well, you guys will have equal say even though you lost the Civil War and wanted to keep black people enslaved, right? So that's obviously a thing. But proponents of the Electoral College, I didn't know that they existed, but, I'm just doing this for argument's sake. They say it forces candidates to seek votes from a range of states rather than just piling up support in big urban areas. And I'm like, fuck off. Like, that's literally pales in comparison to the actual impact of it. So, will the Electoral College system ever change? That's the question. That's the question, right? So Congress tried to repair the flaws that were exposed after the 2020 election when Trump falsely claimed that he won. If you recall, he incited a riot on January 6th, and they maintain that lie today. A lie that has never been appropriately addressed. More flaws in the system. But anyway, so prosecutors have said he pressured state officials to try to overturn the results. He absolutely did. In 2022, Congress passed the Electoral Count Reform Act to clarify that each state's governor or other official, right, so chosen by the state, will certify that's the state's election results before they are delivered to Congress. As in, like, okay, cool, so we're going to have a clear sense of what's going on before it gets to this electoral place. Okay, let me make the case for the law first, because I was about to talk a lot of shit on it. Anyway, the new law also aimed to prevent a repeat of the 1876 election deadlock when 3 states submitted dueling states of elections. I'm like, I don't care. It was in 17, I don't care. Okay, so the law also set a mandatory deadline for certifying results. That I do like, giving states 36 days after the 2024 election to complete recounts and litigation. As long as there's a time cap, you know where it's headed. You know what it's going. But if that's the best, I'll take it. But here's what we actually need. We need to abolish the Electoral College. Point blank, period. That would require a constitutional amendment. And that is where things get tricky. So I know that the filibuster's on the table. Kamala Harris has said that she's going to nix it. She absolutely should. She must. It is being abused, absolutely. But the Electoral College is protected by the Constitution. So, can you change it? Is the Constitution the solution, or is it the problem? That's the thing. So the Constitution maintains the formula. So those numbers that I told you about, Wyoming has this, California has that. That's the Constitution's formula. That's what those weirdos with cow teeth in their mouth decided. Can we just take a second to... Do you ever just stop and think about this? Like, people with dirty assholes decided this? Like, doesn't that disturb you? It keeps me up at night. It keeps me up at night. I'll just be sitting there, just minding my business, reading, I don't know, Steve Martin's biography, and it'll just hit me. It'll just hit me that Thomas Jefferson was dirty. He was a nasty, nasty man. And his shadow lingers still. Ugh. Anyway, it came from that, right? It made the formula for the Electoral College votes. 1 for each of a state's congressional seats, plus 1 for each of its 2 senators. That's the formula. So, as a consequence, now we can really get into the nitty-gritty of it, right? So California has 1 electoral vote for every 700,000 residents. Wyoming, 1 for every 190,000, right? Remember, those numbers are important. So you don't see it remarked quite as often again around Texas, but that's because I don't care. So what was the Constitution, what was it meant to do? Let's just take a second and think about it, okay? So the point of the Constitution, if I'm going back to these weirdos with bad wigs, right? No edge tape, nothing going on there. They're just running around looking crazy and being dirty. It was the logic of the day kind of made, so they wanted to, the Constitution was written to do 2 things, right? It was to stop some one lone ranger guy on a white horse. For some reason, that's a thing that kept coming up. Like, it's a weird thing that they feared. It's the metaphor of some guy on a white, I'm like, what is that? Anyway, the guy coming up that's going to disrupt the whole thing. But so they needed protection from a person that was seeking to upend everything, but they also needed protection from the mob, which was us. So So the Constitution was meant to remove absolute power from the table for both of those things. So the government was supposed to be caught in the vice grip. So if we're going to put it to modern times, think The Simpsons, okay? For a second, just think The Simpsons and imagine that you're Mayor Quimby, but not insane. The mob is always going crazy on The Simpsons. And then on the other side, you have Mr. Burns, the billionaire, right? Who at one point tried to block out the sun, right? Because he didn't like it. He didn't like it. He didn't like it on his skin. And he literally blocked out the sun in this. That's what the Constitution was designed for, right? God, I could make this shit so interesting. When I read it, I was like, this is the dullest shit in the world. Unless you hate The Simpsons, in which case I apologize. And also, I don't like you. So, I like you. I do. So the whole point was no one person or faction could hijack the democratic decision-making process. That was the point of the Constitution. So what is it? Just think about this. Think about how, not just this, like these nasty, nasty ancient people who had the bones of a 108-year-old diseased leper at the age of 34, right? The Constitution is 4,500 words long. That's it, right? 4,543 to be exact. To give you a sense, that's 4 magazine pages. I did look that up. I was like, what? It's just 4 magazine pages. It's about the length of any article that is a little longer than average, like think New Yorker profile, okay? So you can read the whole thing in 15 minutes, right? And then it has operative amendments. So that's another 3,000 words that underwrites the entire system of government. That's it. That's it. That's what's shaping all of this. You see? So just think of it like this, right? So that 4-page document, the equivalent of that, right? That's the system of government. That's the system that employs on national, state, and municipal levels, right? More than 19 million people, right? All of those employees, in a way, represent the state and are subject to the Constitution's rules, right? And what the government can and cannot do. Of course, we know individual states have their own constitutions and municipalities have their own charters, but not a single thing in them can contradict what is in the federal Constitution, right? It is absolute. In our quote-unquote republic, it is absolute. So there's a consensus generally across the board, historically and today, that if it's in the Constitution, you can't do it, it can't be done. Of course we know that the GOP currently, that's the double standard. They say that the Democrats are the non-American party. They say that they're attacking the Constitution, but actually these are the folks that are seeking to disband the very system that their so-called heroes, loved. And again, I'm like, the wrong side is calling for the abolishment of the old ways. They want a kind of oligarchy, which is just a monarchy, but with a couple other guys. That's pretty much it, right? The ugliest orgy you can imagine. Anyway, so, okay. So why this matters is because it is the Constitution that is blocking us from abolishing the Electoral College. Very, very briefly, who is it that gets to say, right? Because of course we have the Constitution, but what is the body that gets to decide what the Constitution actually means or doesn't mean? The Supreme Court. The fucking Supreme Court. They are the ultimate authority on the ultimate authority, right? One is supposed to be an ultimate authority. The other is supposed to be, that is a lot of authority. That's an unbelievable amount of authority. And we know that these 9 unelected individuals, right? You didn't get a say in it. I wasn't going to. Okay, I'll point to somebody here. You didn't get a say in it, right? Nobody got a say in it. Except for whoever the president is, and we know, RPG. Anyway, it's 6-3. It's 6-3, and we are getting our ass handed to me. But it's they're wildly off the rails, but this is the thing. I look to the experts and I'll be like, I'll just spend time. So this is and I'm not going to say this because of course they'll be like, of course, the Marxist Like, they probably call me a dyke or something cool, you know, so whatever, right? But I'm like, no, let me hide behind a white man because I'm smart. I am a smart, so I'm going to hide behind the words of a white as I seek citizenship to this horrible place. Anyway, so Erwin Chemerinsky is the dean of the law school at the University of California, Berkeley. That's how you, so you could be like, all right, he's a good one. He thinks it's time to lose the Constitution. So he wrote a book called The Case. So first of all, his first book, right? The Case Against the Supreme Court. You know, that had my attention. That's how I learned about this guy. And in it, he argues, right? So because we know the Supreme Court is so wildly lopsided, he argued, quote, that the court has frequently failed throughout American history and at its most important tasks, at its most important moments. I can't think of a sassier set of lines. But just straight up ethered them. So look, he had my attention right there. But get this. So from the reason why I'm bringing this up is to remind you, we were like, oh, this is the absolute worst. Like, we're in the worst position. Every generation of us has been in the worst situation. It's just worse for different reasons. But think about the wins that happened in worser conditions. But that was like for a time in between, right? But like, I'm going to go back for a second, right? From the 1890s to 1937, the Supreme Court struck down some around like 200 state and federal laws regulating business. As in protecting people from exploitative business entities, what would eventually become corporations, right? The merchant class was the ruling class during that very ugly time. So, right, they struck it down. Many of those laws that were meant to regulate business were intended to protect workers' health and safety. Others were to pull the country out of the Depression. They struck it down. They said no. They have always been in the hands of the wealthy on some level, right? So in 1927, get this, the court upheld the enforced sterilizations of persons diagnosed with what at that time was called mental retardation, right? In 1944, the Supreme Court affirmed the constitutionality of the Roosevelt administration's policy of rounding up Japanese Americans and sending them to internment camps. Right? Okay, you with me? How about a little more? Just a bit, right? So I'm sure we all know about the whole Plessy, versus Ferguson thing, and they decided in 1896, right? So that one was one, and Brown v. Board of Education, we know that was decided in 1954, and in spite of the 14th, right, and 15th Amendments, so that's the Equal Protection and Right to Vote amendments, the court barely lifted a fucking finger. I've been really coming hard on the fucks. I think it's maybe because I've been listening to a lot of Irish TV, but anyway, whatever. They did nothing. They did nothing, really, to end segregation and disenfranchisement on the basis of race. That was their job. This is in the Constitution. And to be clear, Congress or like the executive branch, they didn't do much either, right? So the court didn't rule that the Constitution forbids discrimination on the basis of sex until 1971. So I don't know if this comforts you. That sounds weird to say, but it kind of does for me because I'm like, the Supreme Court has always been raggedy. They've always been like just awful on some level. And what matters is who's in it and how much power they can be afforded. So if we get our folks in there, we win on some level. Anyway, the point is that we've always lived in a hellscape, and we have won, even though we have been in a hellscape, even though it's oftentimes been against a seated government, against current cultural norms like slavery, like sexuality discrimination and gender discrimination in ways rampant and unbridled. And the way that we're so willing to frivolously throw it away suggests to me that the conditions were so shit that people spent and oftentimes sacrificed their lives to change the conditions, the things that we can so easily take for granted and say, well, I'm going to do this to make a point. Because I'm telling you what it's not doing is stopping the bombs from flowing and exploding people and futures in Gaza, in Lebanon, across Palestine, across the Middle East. No, that's called foreign policy. That's something that we can have a hand in or not. So, throughout this book, Cheminsky, he was pretty meh on the Constitution, right? So he even praised it a little bit. That was that first book. But his position evolved, and he went after the Constitution in his latest book, right? Which I had to get. I was like, tell me about it, right? So this is what he has to say. He's like, the framers of the Constitution went too far in preventing amendments. That's what his arguments now are in this book. And as a result, we are stuck with a set of rules which not only make addressing political problems harder, but is actually responsible for many of the political problems we need to address. That's what the Constitution is today, according to him. Remember, I'm hiding behind this white man. Okay, so this is his quote, right? So the Constitution's, quote, very existence as a largely unchanged document has become a sledgehammer wielded by a minority to prop up a system that engenders polarization and festering national discord. Fuck yeah, that's 100% correct, right? He doesn't just want to amend the Constitution either. He wants us to throw it away and come up with a new one. And when you think about the losers who made it, the slave owners and murderers and dirty ones, why not? Like, imagine being so against the idea of evolution. Imagine being against using science and technology and expertise that we've gleaned over several sets of generations to come up with something fucking awesome. And it really is that simple. You make a new norm and then you make it true. So, unshockingly, the principal target of his latest book that goes after the Constitution is the Electoral College, right? Because the problem isn't so much that the wrong person wins, right? That's obviously the major impact. It's what it does to us as a public when we lose faith completely in the process. And like, how could you not? How could you not? This country manufactures hardship by design. So the stupidest part of this whole thing, right, is that state charters, municipal charters, the Constitution is all just fiction, just made up, right? Even think about the fact on the electoral counts themselves, right? The states, their borders, they just changed over and over again, both before and after their admission to the Union. One day you're a citizen of Massachusetts, the next day you're a citizen of, I don't know, Michigan. It's probably Maine or something. I should probably say something closer. Anyway, it doesn't matter, right? So why should we ever honor that? Why should we be stuck to that? Like, why should the system of representation honor this? So this is some of his solutions, right? He's talking about ending lifetime appointments for federal court justices. Obviously, yes, 100%. Eliminate the filibuster. We've talked about this. There's an episode on it. We absolutely should. And the Electoral College, 100%. But according to him, and this is according to him, the anti-majoritarian elements of the Constitution. So remember, the Constitution was written as like, we want to protect ourselves from the weirdo, superpowered individual and also from the mob. That's the majority, right? So the anti-majority elements of the Constitution, plus the filibuster and partisan gerrymandering, so the redrawing of lines anytime they feel like it, allow a minority to control the political process anyway. It doesn't even do the thing it was supposed to do. And that minority can just keep reforming and redressing things from ever getting voted on. They just stop any progress from happening. Hence, you've got Edwin's call for a new constitutional convention. I'm a big fan of that. He's like, let's start the whole thing from over the top. And I'm a big fan of that. And you know what? He's not the only one. Did I get his book? Hold on. Anyway, I think you have enough information, but I thought I underlined it. It's a really long title, but it's basically like the Constitution is like the greatest threat, or something like that. But then there's another book too that I got, which is Partisan Nation: The Dangerous New Logic of American Politics in a Nationalized Era, and that's by Paul Pierson and Eric Schickler. I didn't mean to emphasize it that much. I'm sorry if that was weird. I'm dehydrated. Anyway, so what Pearson and Schickler are concerned with is not political strife, of which there's been plenty, right? In which democracies are supposed to be able to accommodate its polarization and the emergence of these two ideologically rigid political parties intolerant of any kind of compromise. And, I would say that that's actually, I would expand it out. It's not just between Democrats and Republicans, but also Democrats and us. Anyway, so that's it. This is where we're at. It matters. Just remember that there's a guy out there named Donald Trump who's talking about how he says they're coming from the Congo, they're coming from Africa, they're coming from the Middle East, they're coming from all over the world, Asia. A lot of them are coming from Asia. And what's happening to our country is we're destroying the fabric of life in our country, and we're not going to take any longer, and you got to get rid of these people. That is a direct quote from Donald Trump, right? Remember that Putin and Netanyahu desperately want a Trump victory. So, I want to squeeze them so hard until, you know what? I'm going to find a white man quote to hide behind when it comes for what I want to say. So anyway, my point is, you get it. I wanted to give us a little bit of a Civics 101 because it's so important to know fully all of the elements at play and how so much suffering, hardship, bullshit, nonsense is by design in this country because some fucking weirdos. And I'm sorry, no musical is going to change my view on them. I don't like singing rap. Changes the fact that this shit's got to go. And Termininsky said, I didn't say it. Anyway, why don't we hit the VMs for that question of the day?
I saw that you did the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year, and I was just wondering if you had any advice for someone who's considering going in 2025. Thank you.
Yes. Some of you, I think I answered a question similar to this. Look, if you should go if you want to have a weird Gothic gloom experience, if you like Gothic architecture, if you don't like the sun, it's a great place to go. No, there's an incredible amount of art. The problem is there's like 3,000 shows going on at the exact same time. And so if you're going to go, have a plan. I performed every day in a hotel nightclub in the basement for a matinee show. It was a brunch show. It was a wild time. And lived in poverty in a nuclear bunker. I didn't have to live in abject poverty the way I did, but I was like, I'm here for the experience. All of us were. It was weird. It was like 6 of us, and we were performing in the poshest hotel, and then going and staying in a nuclear bunker with no running water. But honestly, it was a good time. But I'll just say, if you are pure stand-up, I don't know that it's the best place for you to go. I think if you are avant-garde and you have a one-person show, and, it's more artistic, more performative, Edinburgh and the Fringe Festival is perfect for you. But it's too damn expensive. That's the thing. It never used to be. It used to be the place that you went when you didn't have money, but you were a performing artist, and the art was pure, man. It was pure. Like the Coke that Thomas Jefferson and George Washington was using, probably. Even the metric system. The SNL was talking about how little that shit made sense. Anyway. So yeah. Go and, make your own little legacies. But if you're a stand-up comic, maybe don't go. Maybe don't. It's not the best place for that, but it's definitely worth it. Costs an arm and a leg. But I had a good time. I will say, though, I did discover, ABBA. I discovered ABBA out there. I bonded. I didn't know much about ABBA or whatever, but I just was in some weird party, and everybody was very old, and they all wore sequins. And I got to tell you, I don't know if it was Stockholm's or what, ABBA's fucking fantastic. They're great. And I thought that they were underrated, but turns out everybody in the world knew them except for me. Mamma Mia is a dope song, but the one about money, that song is an anthem. Don't play with me right now. Anyway, why don't we hit that and music? Bet. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me. The show really is a labor of love. We're available everywhere podcasts are. We've got new episodes dropping 4 times a week. Don't forget, I want to hear from you. Drop your email and voice notes questions to jfktodayshow@gmail.com. If I have to hear my awful voice, so do you. Shout out to KR and Carol and the JFK team. That's literally it, but whatever. And shout out to you, the listeners, that make it all possible. Love you. Peace.